Persecution. Most definitions of persecution talk about the extermination or the driving out of a people based upon race, religious belief, or social beliefs. There are other reasons. Sexual orientation can be another. One web definition that I was able to find for the word said the correct usage of that word would be the persecution of the Christians by the Romans. Okay, let's cast our mind back to exactly what was happening to the Christians as performed by the Romans that we could call persecution. It was basically killing people, destroying their property, driving them out with a foot up their arse, a sword at their throat. There was a radio show on Radio 4 last night where there were three religious people talking about how religious people were being persecuted by the new atheists. I'm sorry, I had to laugh. I was driving. I was actually in danger on the road last night. I took a much longer route home so I could listen to this whole conversation on the radio. And there were times where I wasn't watching the road. There were times where my eyes were pointed straight up to the ceiling of my car, and I was just roaring with laughter. I even bashed the steering wheel at one point, and it hurt my hand. I was trying to slap my thigh, and there was this goddamn steering wheel in the way. Those three religious people and one humanist, obviously the humanist got a quarter of the airtime that the religious viewpoint got, and I don't think any of those religious people had a spell on the microphone without using the word persecution. It was their buzzword. It was almost you could almost sense an unspoken agreement between the two Christians and the Muslim to use the word persecution constantly. So we're the Romans, are we? What other word is there than pathetic? What other word is there? You're not being persecuted, you're being rejected, you're being sidelined. That is not persecution. If there is any Christian or Muslim out there being chased around by a crowd of atheists with banners saying, "Get out, or we're going to kill you," let me know, and I'll come around and I'll stand with a banner outside your house saying, "Stop persecuting these people." If that isn't happening, if you're not being physically threatened, if all you're getting is sarcasm, and you call that persecution, call me and I'll bring you a fucking dictionary. Criticism is not persecution. Sarcasm is not persecution. People laughing at you is not persecution. It's not even harassment. It won't be brought to you. If anyone laughs at you, it's because of something you just said. And I reserve the right to say to anyone who says something utterly idiotic and banal, I reserve the right to call what they've just said idiotic and banal, and to show why I thought it was such. That is not persecution. If that radio show could have been rerun, and I would love, I wonder if it's technically possible, to get hold of that audio track, and every time they said the word persecution, just put in the word rejection. And instead of persecuted, rejected. You're being rejected. Zeus didn't die out overnight. It took centuries. But you're going. You know you're going. You sense you're going. And all you've got is, we're being persecuted. You're not being believed. It's not the same thing. It reminds me of some women I used to work with in a large office who used to proselytise and evangelise, and they got nowhere. They were just being ignored. They knew it. It must have brought them some sadness, but it wasn't persecution. It wasn't harassment. It was just being ignored and rejected. I saw them again, only this year, still doing the same thing in the town centre. Now these women all have minor disfigurements. You can see why they turn to religion. They had to believe their suffering had a purpose. The first thing that came along which told them that their suffering did have a reason and did have a purpose, and it wasn't just some cruel roll of the dice. They latched onto it when they were young, and that was it. They were gone. And I saw them pulling their freak show in the centre of a city, surrounded. I sat there for an hour, eating a McDonald's and smoking a couple of cigarettes, just watching them. I didn't reveal myself to them. They know me. I think they would smile if they saw me, if that's any indicator of how I am to Christians face to face. And I watched, and in that hour there must have been, at a guess, 20,000 people in and around that city centre who came into at least visual contact with them and walked on by. Nobody that I saw stopped. Well, one or two did, but they obviously knew the evangelists. Probably evangelists themselves. They were just ignored. Do you imagine 3 Christians standing in a Roman town hall square at the time of Christian persecution? What do you think would have happened to them? All people did was ignore them and look at them as if to say, "Whoa, crazy people." That's not persecution. While listening to the radio show, there was just a moment where I thought, they know we're winning. They know. You see, when I say winning, it's like a pollen grain in a water solution. The pollen grain is being jiggled about randomly by the movements of the countless atoms in the water. The pollen grain overall doesn't move much. It vibrates, but it doesn't move too much across the surface because statistically it's not allowed to. When it gets a hard shove on one side, statistically it won't be long before it gets an equally hard shove on the other side. That is like public opinion. Public opinion is that pollen grain. And for too long the religious have been consciously and in a very organised fashion pushing that pollen grain off centre. Now they're getting all pissy because rationalists are starting to consciously push it back the other way, and it's moving, and they can see it, they sense it, they know it's happening. When you say that you're being persecuted, what that means is you know you're losing, you know you're being diminished, you know you're shrinking, you know your way of thought, your worldview is fading. It's very, very slow. You are worshipping Wotan and Zeus. The day of the death of your God is coming. You can see it. You seem powerless to turn it around, and you don't know why. It's because it's a wrong idea. Wrong ideas all eventually fall. As I've said before, if you want to defeat atheism, you've got to go to the libraries and burn all the books. That's your only chance. You've got to shut down the internet. You've got to stop people talking. It's the only way that you can do it. Your enemy is knowledge. Your enemies are facts. It's not us. We're just pointing out the facts and pointing out the knowledge, and that does the work for us. Maybe it's because I've got 20,000 subscribers, but recently I have had a lot of letters from people who currently call themselves Christian. Don't think there might be one Muslim in there, but they would call themselves religious right now, but they and I are having very pleasant conversations. I am not proselytizing, I'm just answering their questions, giving my viewpoint. I'm not attacking their beliefs because they're not throwing their beliefs at me. They actually want a conversation, and that's all they're getting. And there are more of them than there were. I'm sure the fact that I've got so many subscribers is a factor. You can either ride the wave safely towards the land, or you can be carried out to sea. You're not going to be killed, you're not going to be harmed. All you're going to be is ignored, rejected, and eventually forgotten. And it's your choice. Being laughed at is not persecution. Being ignored is not persecution. Having your ideas rejected, it's not persecution. It's just an indication that you may have got something slightly wrong.